Hi, this is Mr. Miyagi, and this is Mr. Miyagi's shop. So, today we're going to work on head, and we're going to paint a cylinder. I'll start off with painting the cylinder. What I've done here to get it ready to paint, of course I've cleaned it, with solvent and everything, got it all cleaned up, got all the little dirt and all the other little pieces off of it. But what I ended up doing is I made a couple little items to help keep the paint from getting on there. So I made these little cups that fit over the lower part of the cylinder. And then I've also masked off areas that I don't want painted, these surfaces. And then on the top one, I made a pattern. Now using the pin locators, I used those. Oh, got it the wrong way. To lock those down. So now I can paint this unit, and it's pretty well sealed up. What I'll also do is I'll lay a few little items on here just to weight down to make sure that the paper doesn't rise up and the paint can get underneath. So we'll get to that a little later. I'm going to put it over there on my stand and I'll paint it. And the paint I'm using is this engine. We're going to engine paint. And this is a gloss black that I'm using on there. Now I do have some semi-gloss going back and forth on it. Since the case is a gloss black, I may go with semi-gloss on the cylinder. Haven't decided on that yet, but anyway, I thought I'd point that out. Move that off the side here. These are another fine little item along with your masking tape to get all these areas done on it. Okay, moving on to the heads. Well, you can see that this thing here is a mess. I mean, it's got rust on there, it's got carbon built up and everything. Now, one thing that I did already is that since this had a gasket on it, and it was kind of, when I pulled it off, it still had residue of the gasket on there. So I have you can use anything. I have this piece of steel that I used with some lightweight sandpaper and used to help clean that up and surface that area. Now the next thing that I want to do is I want to get in here and clean out all this carbon and everything. So let me get set up for that and we'll be right back. Now, one of the simplest tools that you can use to help clean this out is one of these wire brush tips and your battery operated or your plug-in drill. So basically all you're doing and then the battery runs dead. Oh, came out. Never mind. Now you can see that I did a pretty good job of cleaning up this area. I like to do this with the valves in place. It just helps get into where this carbon and everything is built up, and you're not damaging the valve seats. That way you can give it a little bit of pressure. Now you can actually take a little bit of cleaner and put in here. Put some old spark plugs in and let it sit in here and clean. You can also, that will also test to see if you have any leakage around your valves. I've got this little screwdriver. Now I used this in when I was removing the seal on the starter. Well, now with the sharpened edge, I can get in here and do a little bit more scraping on the valve. You can't get it all off right at the moment. You can always spray it with cleaner of some sort, and that's baked on there pretty good. You don't want to be sitting here banging on it with a hammer trying to get this stuff off, because you could damage the valve and damage some other things. So we'll do a little bit more of this. Looks like we got the chambers fairly well cleaned up, but the exhaust valve here still looks a little crusty. So we're going to end up pulling this thing apart anyway. So what I'm going to end up doing here is I'm going to get set up to pull it apart, and I'll show you how to do that. Okay, for removing these valves, you need one of these little valve spring compressing tools. And basically all it is a tool that sits against the inside of the valve here, right in here, and the outside of the valve up here where the keepers are at. One of the major things you need is a magnet. Helps get them out. So basically all you're doing is you're screwing this down so you can get in to get the keepers out. You get one keeper out and two. So one thing I would suggest is that you have a little bucket or a little catch to keep that in. So when you're removing these, you just want to back them off. Don't get carried away because these things will shoot springs every which way. And what you're going to find is you're going to have the spring cap, and you're going to have an outer and an inner spring. Now what I've got here, let's see what you got. I have this little cardboard box thing I made up. This is right, that's left. That's exhaust, that's intake. So basically what I like to do is set that in front of me. And I'll place the items that came off of that valve right there, and then I will push the valve through, and it'll go there. Now you can see that this is an exhaust valve, and it's been sitting a while. There's a spider nest in there. And there's also, on top of this, a stem seal that you want to remove because you're going to replace that. These are not worth keeping. And then on the bottom of that is a spring ride. So that's pretty much everything. You have a spacer that the spring sits on, and the spring assembly itself, and the keepers. So let's move on to the intake valve on the right side. So you're just screwing it down, lining it up. Now you can buy these little valve spring compressors pretty much anywhere. You can get them online, I suppose eBay or whether like that, Harbor Freight, some of the auto parts store. Sometimes these little keepers will be a little on the stiff side because they've sat in there for a while, so you just want to tap them a little bit. Then take your magnet and pull those out. And then back it off. All right. Set that aside. Here again we have the cap, the two springs, the lower shim, and the valve. You can see that this is pretty carboned up too, and it's built up with all sorts of crap. We'll put that right there. Now looking at the valves on this, there's a little bit of rust and everything built up around here. Now we're going to go through again with the cleaning tool, the wire brush, and straighten that out. Now if you don't have a way to have the valves ground on this, I'll show you a couple little tricks that you can do yourself. Let's get this intake off of here. So here we go. Everything's there. We're going to probably clean those up a little later on. Pop the valve out. Bit on the crust. And the seal and the shim. So basically all you're doing is when you're doing this compression is that you're sitting against the valve. So this is compressing the valve, this top piece here, so you can get to the keepers. And then the valve, this piece here is riding, the lower section is riding against the valve surface itself. So pretty straightforward. Okay, so one thing that we're going to look at is the inside surface of this. This is pretty crusty inside here. So we're going to spend some time cleaning all this area up. Right, this is the left side. This is the one that was all kind of smoking and had a lot of buildup on it. If you remember, we had a lot of buildup on the valve. So this looks like, you know, there was probably, I don't know if there was, let me check the valve here. One check that you can do on the valve, you can put it in there and grab the stem and see if you get any movement at all. And there's no movement in here, so I've got a feeling that, we'll do the intake too. I got a feeling that the valve guides are in great shape. The seal, when I was popping the seals all look good. All of these little rubbers on there, there's plenty good seal around them. So my suspicion was that this had a bad oil ring on the piston, or it just was wore out. One of the tricks is we just need to get this thing cleaned up. Get in here and clean up a little more. Now this is a brass wire brush, so it doesn't scar the surfaces as bad. Actually, this all is looking pretty good in here. So now you can see is that this cleaned up fairly well around the seats and everything, the valve seats. Now this one here, we got a little bit of buildup on the inside there. So what we're going to end up doing now is that I'm going to get in here and get a smaller wire brush to get in here and get it cleaned up. So we'll go down in the intake. That's looking pretty good. There's a lot of crust still built up in here. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to stay away from the seat itself. I'm just trying to break this carbon that's in here off. You can see that this is just flaking out. So basically all I'm doing is I'm going in here and I'm cleaning up this surface so that there's good contact and good flow. Now if you have a soak tank, which I do, I'm going to actually set this in there, let it sit for a while. And then meanwhile, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to my wire wheel and clean the back of these valves and the front of the valves. So I'll get back to you here in a little bit. Well, you can see that I've cleaned up the head fairly well. I got rid of all the carbon and everything. I started out with a big brush to clean out all this area. I went to a medium size to kind of get this and then in there a little bit. And then I went to a 1 inch smaller to really get down inside and do a lot of cleaning all over the place there. Look down in there. Look here. Looks pretty clean. So where we're at right now is that if you don't have the money for a valve grind, and most time on these XS650s, they don't have that many miles on them. Most of the miles they had are sitting in the garage and not running and whatever. So a lot of times you can just relap the valves instead of having a valve job done. And you can do this yourself. Let's say you want to make sure that the valves, when they're in the guides, that there's no movement. Or if there is, very, very little movement. You also want to look at the surface here. If there's a large pitting or it's burnt, you're going to have a valve job. And these actually, this intake, you can see, fairly clean. This has got a little bit of staining on it, but this is also an exhaust valve. Now what I ended up doing, I did this side already. I lapped in this side. So here's the difference between the two valves after lapping. That one hasn't been lapped. This one has. Now it's good and shiny and everything looks good, and it's seated into the valve seat. I also did that on the intake. Much duller finish here. This is a shinier finish, but this one's seated in, this one's been lapped into place. So I'll show you how to do this. What you're going to need is you're going to need some lapping compound. Now I have this series here, which is a coarse that you first start out with, and then a fine grade you start out with. Or you can just get a straight valve grinding compound and use it. I really prefer to go with the heavy, the coarse, and then go to the light to finish up. A couple other things you might need. You could do the old school way where you slip it back and forth. You can use a tube on the end of it as you're doing it down inside there. One other way to do it, this is the way I prefer to do it, is I use a small drill. Now what you want to do on this, you want to apply some coarse compound, valve grinding compound, on the edge of the valve where it's going to seat. Also what you want to do is you want to apply a little bit of lubricant on the stem of the valve, especially if you're going to use a drill, because you're going to be turning this thing. Slide it back down in there. Then attach your drill. You can see that it's spinning. So basically what I'm doing is I'm moving this in and out. Then I'm reversing. Then I'm doing it the opposite way. When you're lifting it out of there, what it's doing is it's drawing that compound back down onto the surface. When you're spinning it, you tend to throw it out. So what that's going to do is it's actually going to bring that compound where you need it, on the surface of that seat area. I'll do this a little bit. A lot of times it doesn't really take all that much to do. So then you push your valve out. And then we want to clean and check the surface. So basically what we're doing is we're wiping away the compound on there. Now that's starting to look pretty good. It still needs a bit more, but we also want to check the seat. It still has some staining on there, so we're going to apply a little bit more compound and continue on. And one thing you want to make sure you do not do is allow any of that compound to get on the stem while it's going in back into the valve guide, because that could grind, could loosen everything up on the valve. It's valve stem area and the valve guide. Also, I don't have this drill on high speed, I have it on low speed. Sometimes you just need to have it spin a little bit. Takes a little longer if you're using this system, and a lot of times, like these suction cups which you buy, don't really work all that well. I've had several over the years and they wear out. Like this one is not all that great. That's why I've gone to using the drill. And using the hose, you have to make sure you get a nice tight fit on there. Otherwise, it's not going to work proper. So I'm back to using the drill. I'm thinking that looks pretty darn good. So we'll check the seat. See, it has just a little bit of discoloring on there, but we should be able to take care of that with the fine grit. So now we're going to move to the fine grit and finish seating this in. Here again, you're just applying a little bit on the edge. Now, I didn't put any grease on there because I think we got plenty in there right now for the couple times that I've stuck it in there. Oh yeah, that really looks nice. You can see that it's nice and shiny all the way around. Look at the seat. Oh yeah, it took a lot of that discoloring out of there. You're going to have maybe sometimes have a little bit when you're lapping left over without doing a full valve grind. But you also got to remember, especially on this is an exhaust side, and that pretty much took away everything in there. Looks really good. Okay, well, let's move on to the intake. This is just an easy way, inexpensive way of kind of just making sure your head's in good shape. It's kind of like when they bought these bikes. I wanted a bike really bad. It came out and they rode them for a while and then they got tired of them or they got married, which can happen. And they just sit most of the time. Now, this type of system of relapping the valves in only works if this head has not been exposed to the elements. I mean, if it's sat out in the rain or you got water down in there, you're probably going to end up finding that the valve seat or the valve, everything are pitted. Well, then you're going to really need a valve job done on it. So you're going to have to take it in and have it done. But this is something what I'm doing now is something you can do at home at low expense. All right. So now we've got a really nice there. We're going to go to the fine. So you can see it really doesn't take all that much, especially if your head is in pretty good shape. Now remember, this one here sat outside, but it was pretty much closed up, and I've lucked out on it, except for that side case bearing on the crank that I found that was a little on the rough side. I've gone over all the bearings and everything on this bike, and they all seem to be in fairly decent shape. So I wasn't expecting a big surprise since I didn't see a burnt valve in this, although I did see some carbon buildup on the heads and cylinders, the piston tops. I know I'm probably driving some motorcycle mechanic nuts here showing you this trick. Well, I've done it on several of my motors that I'm running now. I did a rephase motor. I didn't do the head on it. I just relapped in the valves. Everything was great. The motor on the dual sport, I did the same thing on it. Oh, that's really a nice looking all the way around there. Let's take a look at the seat now. Oh, that's beautiful. Fantastic. So right now what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to take a little bit of cleaner and just make sure that we've gotten all of the compound off of the valve seats and anything, if there might have been any in the stem. There we go. Alrighty, it's looking good. We'll do a little spray down on the valve and do it wipe clean. And we'll do it on the exhaust valve. Now I've already done the other valves when I did the lapping on those. But that's a simple and easy way to do that. Now it's just putting it back together again. We'll block this up here. We'll do the left side intake. Make sure that I put everything back together like the way I wanted it. All right. Move all this stuff out of the way, the compound and stuff. But all this stuff you can get at your local auto parts store. They should carry this. Okay, we've got everything lapped into place now. Break into our package of seals and such. When you bought your kit, I hope you bought a gasket kit. Find them online, eBay, Mike's XS, all the other places that have them. One thing we've got to put on now is we want to put on the valve stem seals. And there are 4 of them. And they're fairly easy to apply. They just push down on the stem as such. They make a tool for that, but I don't know why. Pretty simple. Okay, so what we got going on here, we're going to put in the left side intake. Here again, we're going to take a little lubricant on the stem, and then we apply a little bit around the lip edge. This is just in case your motor sits for a while. It at least has a little bit of protection. And then I like to apply a little bit on the inside here of these. Let me shove these in. There we go. So now the spacer goes in and the springs tied in, tight coil to the bottom on both the big and small. Usually I have this kind of clamped in the vise, but I have a little mount for it, but we're not going to do that today, because a lot of times you guys don't have those special little mounts, so I'll show you how it can be done without. All right, so we want to get this down so we can get the clip in, the valve clip. Want to apply a little bit of lubricant, a little sticky stuff there. All that does is just help hold that clip in while you get when you back off this spring compressor. And what my dad taught me to do to help seat these valves and the clips, just tap it, don't bang it. So let's move on to the other intake valve. Apply a little around there, up here at the heads where it goes through the seal, and then on the stem. In place. Spacer. Springs, tight coil down. Cap. Clip. Little lube on the inside. Tap. Good to go. Flip it over. We're going to do the right side. Clip in. Back off. Last valve. Here we go. I usually put my finger on there to hold that seal, that stem seal in place too. Shim, springs, tight coiled down, cap, compress. Okay, the clip. And if you see, these clips are tapered, so the tapered end, you know, I didn't mention that before, but the tapered end goes down. Otherwise it doesn't fit. There we go. Little tap. Good to go. One head. Yeah, they usually smoke when they first start up anyway. There you have it, boys and girls. Important thing, just keep your valves and everything in the right place so that the wear factor is always the same. So that's why I do this. Right side, left side. Pretty simple. Exhaust, intake. Okay, now this is the rocker box. One of the things we like to do is we like to remove these little tubes that go up along the head bolts. And why you want to do that is there's a little O-ring, an orange O-ring that you should replace on those. All this is a piece of 5/8 tubing. Seems to work quite well. You could use a 5/8 rod just to knock those out. Because this thing needs a bath and we got to clean it up yet. Sometimes they come out easy, sometimes they don't come out so easy at all. So you pull those out. Like I said, we're going to replace those. Those are those little O-rings that you see in the kit there. You were wondering what they were for? Well, that's what they're for. Another thing we'd want to take off is the rocker caps themselves. Why? It's because there's a seal, an O-ring seal that we need to replace there too. Impact driver, once again, comes in handy. Another one of those little fine tools you didn't think you needed, but yeah, you do. One more to go. So that's what these seals look like. This one right here. And of course, they're right here in the little bag. So we want to check this, and the rockers look really good. No side play. The adjustment tappets look good. The surface here looks wonderful, and so does the cam. That's how your valves work. Okay. Cam bearings feel pretty good on that too. So what we're going to end up doing now is we're going to put this in the tank. But I'm going to clean all this stuff up, and we'll talk to you in a little bit. All right, we're right back at the rocker box. It's all cleaned up now. We're going to put the sleeves in. These sleeves are have an O-ring seal on them that fit right in this little indent right here. And then these slide down on. What I kind of like to do with these, here, grab a little bit of lube and lube them up a little bit, slide them in. Also, if you ever need to pull the rocker arm shafts, you can make up a little tool like this that just threads in that shaft there, and then a 10mm wrench, and you can crank that out. I'm not going to try pull. I don't want to. We'll show you here. This just will start pulling that unit out of there. But that's if you ever have to pull those for some reason. And then they just tap back into place. So anyway, so let's put the sleeves in. Got this one lubed a little bit here. And these just pretty much just tap back into place. This just gives extra sealing for this area around here where you go through the rocker arm. So when this gets clamped down on the head, everything is sealed. So in order to keep the fluid from this in here creeping out alongside the head bolt studs, that just helps seal it. Pushed into where they're flush. Okay, those are in. So we want to also put the caps on, rocker caps. These have O-rings that you want to put on. Want to remove the old ones. And let's just do a little bit. Down that. Just helps them seal and let them turn in there a little easier. Hopper here. Locked in. This is pretty much ready to go on the head. Okay, one other thing I'd like to do is, so it doesn't get forgotten in the process, is to put the O-rings at the base of the cylinder. This just helps seal the cylinder base along with the gasket. A lot of times these get left out, or a lot of people don't realize that that's what they have underneath there, these to go on. So little base rings right there. Comes in your kit. So put them on. Anyway, so we got the cylinder painted. We got the head all done. Cams feel good. Cam bearings feel really good. And let's see, we have the rocker assembly done. That's it for this episode of Ranwin Park. Saving the head and painting the cylinder and checking out the rocker boxes. So thanks again for watching. If there's any comments or questions, please put them in the comment section below and I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. So this is Mr. Miyagi signing off from Mr. Miyagi Shops. But wait, if you like it, please like, share, and subscribe. And I'll see you later.